to the show with your friend and mine. So tell me, Dr. Squee, who's it gonna be this time? We like to hear you talk, and we love to hear you listen. And if you are not subscribed, you won't know what you're missing. So welcome to the Dr. Squee Show. Welcome to the Dr. Squee Show. Welcome to the Dr. Squee Show. Headphones up, here we go.
Hello and welcome to the Dr. Squee Show. I'm Dr. Squee and this is my show. Thank you very much for joining us. For anyone who's expecting this interview at 6:30, I do apologize. It had to be moved back slightly because I had to take one of my dogs to the vets. Nothing serious, just a meds review. Don't worry, it happened to Parkinson all the time. My guest tonight is a very exciting one. He has been in a plethora of TV shows and movies, both here and in the States. You might know him from Mad About You, Mascots, Best in Show, Batman the Brave and the Bold, Murder, She Wrote, Star Trek Lower Decks, Designated Survivor, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Modern Family. He wrote Tooth Fairy, and he's pretty much, it might be quicker just to name the TV shows or movies he has not been involved with. Please welcome to the Dr. Squee Show, Jim Piddock. How are you doing, Jim?
Thank you very much. Very good. Yeah, it probably is easier. Yeah, it probably is easier to name what I haven't been in at this point. Yeah.
Well, I was just in preparation for the show. I was just listening to you on Mike Fenton Stevens' wonderful podcast, My Time Capsule. It's just a wonderful. I love the fact that it's such an engine for random stories, and also he's quite a genius that he's come up with a concept which involves the guest coming up with the content, and you just have to talk about it. It's great.
Yeah. No, it's a very clever idea. It's sort of desert island disc with a twist. Yeah.
Well, we're here to talk about your illustrious career. I know you've been doing these interviews back to back, so thank you very much for making time for us tonight.
Cool.
And we're here to talk not only about your illustrious career, but also your autobiography, Caught with My Pants Down, and Other Tales from a Hollywood Life. And I love the fact that you've kept true to your British nature by making sure pants mean pants. That's underwear down as well.
Yeah, well, it's both. I do have a disclaimer at the beginning on that. But how about that picture that's there? How about those legs for a almost 66-year-old man? I mean, come on. If you've got it, flaunt it. Show your best qualities. I've got a good head of hair and some damn fine legs. Not much else, but that's it. And I'm going to sell them.
So I'm of Irish stock, so like I've got very pasty, very veiny legs, and I'm only in my early to mid 40s. We'll say early. Will be generous to me. So yes, those are very enviable legs.
They're darn fine. That was an interesting concept for the design of the cover.
I love it. Now, what I also love is this does slightly smack maybe of a lockdown project. Was that the decision to make this story, get this out there now?
Well, it happened quicker because of the lockdown. Yeah, I mean, I had done this talk in Beverly Hills that I'd been asked by the Screen Actors Guild to do something called Let's Talk About It Inside the Industry. And I was interviewed by a Wall Street Journal reporter in a 200-seat theater. And I was supposed to do 45 minutes and then a Q&A. And I was quite busy at the time, and I just scribbled down a few stories that I could think of that would be fun to tell, that had some sort of relevance to the business, but amused me. And so I did that, and it went down rather better than I thought. And people seemed to love it, and I enjoyed doing it. And we ended up, I think it was an hour and a half. And I came away thinking, well, I haven't done anything on stage for years. I think about 12 years. And I've sort of thought about it. This could be a one-man show where I could just sort of not have to worry that much about learning the lines because I know the stories. And I could just sort of regale the audience with these things and string it all together and have a point to it. And so I started writing this one-man show. And it soon became a 10-hour show, which I realized I couldn't inflict upon anyone, least of all myself. And then I thought, well, I'll just write a book. And I just started it when we got hit with this little thing called COVID. And so I basically just sort of wrote that in what would have taken 5 years. It took me about 5 months. And then obviously, you have to rewrite it and shape it and edit it and whatever. And that's a whole process. But yeah. So I wouldn't say it was a a lockdown project, but it got finished way quicker. This book we'd probably be having this conversation in about 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, and just the amount of people who've written some lovely things about this book. So you got James Cosmo, sorry, Russell Brand, Hugh Bonneville, Seth Meyers, Drew Carey, Ian McShane. It's just a who's who, both of the UK and America, of people who just falling over themselves to give the love to the book.
Yeah, it was really nice that. I mean, it was sent by the publisher to various people I either or sort of, had crossed paths with at some point in my life, who we thought, and just get some feedback. And I ended up 3 dozen amazing, endorsement quotes, but was just sort of really lovely. It kind of blew me away a bit. And I can't thank them enough because it helps sell the book. It's going to sell more on their names than mine. And by the way, I should just sort of state here up front, because I keep forgetting, I've committed all of the royalties I make from the book, any profit I make, to 3 different charities.
Oh, wow.
One of which is for Ukrainian refugees, and the other is for underprivileged kids in America, and one in South London. So the details of those charities are in the book, at the back of the book. So I feel like it helps. It all helps. They've done stuff this week on social media pushing the book, and that's been wonderful. This helps.
Oh, that's amazing. And it's just, I was just listening to another thing, which I listened to after you on my time capsule, was The Bugle with Andy Zaltzman, and the amount of stuff he said about Zelensky, and the fact that he's an ex-comedian, an entertainer himself, and just the stoicism and the amazing resolve which he and the Ukrainian people have had is just stunning.
Yeah, it's inspirational, and I felt originally I decided to give it to these 2 charities that were helping the kids, and then take a small portion myself. But then I just every night, I was pushing this book and doing light-hearted chats and telling fart and poo stories or whatever I tell. And then I'd watch the news and go, oh God, this seems so unimportant what I'm doing, and then luckily, my infinitely better half said, no, it's actually more important now than it's ever been, because people need to escape to something that is positive. And I think my book is very, the feedback I'm getting is it's very life enhancing and life affirming. It's got a very positive message to it, which is unusual for Hollywood stories. But I think that's important, that people need light relief, they need to laugh, and
Yep.
This book has, I think, a lot of laughs in it, mostly at my expense. And then I think that the only other thing I could do, because I was feeling so helpless, was actually, okay, well, then all money that I make from the book goes to Ukrainian refugees. Then I feel like I'm doing something. It's a tiny needle in a haystack, but
the large focus of this book is on the showbiz side of your life, but still, I find these autobiographies are wonderful things, but it must be such a tightrope to walk between being as brutally honest as you can, and you definitely have been in this book, and respecting the trust of the people you've worked with. How do you kind of walk that line?
Yeah, because the majority of people I've worked with I've really liked, and I do get along with most people. I think, eviscerate 3 people totally in the book. I really do eviscerate them and urinate on their corpses afterwards. And one of them's dead, so they can't sue me. 2 of the others are very much alive and well and working and very well known. And then there's 3 or 4 people I kind of am not particularly flattering about, but I don't really go all out on them. And then everybody else, I've got that one chapter where I say, here, it was a game I played on Facebook, when people were doing that weird thing of, here's 10 bands, 9 I've seen live, which one haven't I seen? Now, there was a phase people went through on Facebook, and I look at that and go, there are people here that I've known my entire life. I haven't a clue. I wouldn't have a clue who that band was, and I don't care. I could put 10 bands down that I've seen, or 10 bands, and not even remember which 9 out of the 10 I'd seen. So it was really weird. And so I tried to turn that on its head. And I said, here are 10 A-list actors I've worked with. 9 I adored and 1 I hated. And I didn't say hate, I said 1 was an absolute 4 asterisks word. And you can fill the blanks on that 4 asterisks. And so I then go on to explain, I eliminated in the Facebook thing, I eliminated 1 a day, saying who were the good guys and explaining why. And then at the end, by default, you know who the 4 asterisks is, and I tell you why in no small detail. And I felt justified because there were certain people on that list of 10 who have very bad reputations or slightly shaky ones, and they were candidates, they were legitimate candidates, and I found them wonderful to work with. So in that sense, I rehabilitate some people's reputations. This isn't a hatchet job. It isn't. It isn't a Burning Bridges book. The people I do name and shame, I've no desire to work with. One of them I actually never worked with. It was just an encounter that was quite deeply unpleasant and inexplicable. So I think that I've earned that. I think I've earned that. In my 20s, I couldn't have done this. Well, I had nothing to write about because I'd have been too worried about working again. But now I don't care, and I think that it's right that people are called out, whether it's show business, any form of life. Disrespect and treating people badly and being rude is not acceptable. And the more people that shout about it and say stop, the better. In a nice way, the better.
Yeah, I mean,
that's the.
I think you should either, if you're going to write your life story, you should either have to swear on a stack of Bibles or whatever you believe in that you don't give a shit anymore. Sorry. You see, I'm giving myself stuff to bleep later, but you don't give a toss anymore, or that you're retired. Like one way or the other, you have to have that removed from you so you can just be honest about it.
Well, we'll see. We'll see if I'm retired. I've actually just written my retirement notice. I don't think so. I think the reaction generally has been very, very, very positive. Very positive.
Well, we will back and forth from the book and just generally talking about projects you worked on, if that's okay. So what was it which actually sparked the decision to move to Hollywood or move to, it was New York originally, I believe?
Well, actually, it was San Francisco. I had hit a sort of tough patch. I was young. I'd worked for a couple of years in England in repertory theatre, and my first year was in children's theatre, touring around schools, playing a garden gnome in one play. That was my first professional part, a garden gnome. Not exactly Hamlet. And then I'd done a couple of years in rep and directed a couple of things, bizarrely. And the drama school I'd gone to in London, the drama studio, opened up a branch in Berkeley. And my father had died prematurely, and I was going through a tough time. And I asked them if I could direct, go and direct over there a couple of plays. And they said, sure, but we'd like you to direct one here first to see that you can do it. So I did that, and they liked that. So they packed me off to California for 3 months. And I took with me, I had seen this one-man show about a soccer goalkeeper playing a game on a Sunday morning. And it's an incredible tour de force. It's talking, shouting, leaping, jumping. It's a great piece, and I loved it. And I thought, I'd love to do this somewhere. And I asked the playwright, who was very well known at the time, he was a resident playwright at the Royal Shakespeare Company. I said, would you let me have the right to do it in America? And he said, yeah, if you can get it on, all power to you. Good luck. And I went around every theatre in San Francisco in that 3 months saying, I've got this play, love to do it. And everyone turned me down. Big theatres, small theatres, medium theatres. I was a totally unknown British actor with a play about a subject no one gave an absolute crap about in the States at that time. And so at the end of the 3 months, I was about to come back with, 100 rejection letters in my pocket. And I got a call out of the blue from this director who ran a 99-seat theatre in San Francisco. And he said, our first play of the season has fallen through. How quickly can you get the show up? And I said, about 3 or 4 weeks, probably. And he said, that's exactly what you have. And so I hired a great British director I met out there called Richard Side, and we got it up. And the first night was full because I had, all the people I'd directed at this drama school wanting to see someone who fall on their face, where their teacher directors fall on their face. And then the second night I had 4 people in the audience, which was bizarre. And they sat in the front row. and very, very sweetly gave me a standing ovation at the end, which was quite touching actually for people, you know. And then the reviews came out the next day, and they were, you know, something I couldn't have written them myself. They were dream reviews. And so the show was then sold out immediately, and then extended twice. And then it was picked up by other theatres around America, and then an off-Broadway producer wanted to do it. And so I ended up moving to New York, and I ended up doing the show there. But in the meantime, I found an agent there because I had a tape of the show, what they used to call the VHS tapes, and they still call them that, but we don't have them. And an agent had signed me, and they sent me out on my first audition. And it was for a play on Broadway that George C. Scott was directing and starring in, Present Laughter by Noel Coward. And I got the role, and playing the butler, the valet, in his valet. And so a few months after doing that one-man show in front of 4 people, I was starring in a play on Broadway, which ended up being a big hit. So I mean, it was one of those few moments that my career trajectory has generally been very kind of steady. It's sort of the tortoise and the hare. It's the tortoise journey, and that was one of the moments where it went into overdrive, and because I spent the next 3 years solidly doing Broadway shows.
So all that's down to that moment where it could have been just pack up and go home. If it wasn't just about one play falling through and yours being taken up, the rest doesn't happen.
Yeah, it was. I think it taught me early on to be entrepreneurial. I was always entrepreneurial, and I believe we are. I think if you're a young person wanting to get into the creative business or any business, we are entering an entrepreneurial age. You know, we will not. If you're 35 or under, you're not likely to have one career. You're likely to have several. My generation, I'm in my mid-60s now. It was normal to have one career. You know, if you had 2, that was unusual. So I think we've been through the industrial age, we've been through the technological age, and we still are in it. But I think we are entering an entrepreneurial age. So I think that I always had that in my nature, because, and I'm believe it or not, I was very introverted. I am still quite introverted, but I guess the introverts who go into show business want to be seen and heard. That's why they do it. And so I realized that I couldn't be seen and heard if I was doing it on my own in my living room. I knew that I had to sell myself because it is show business. There was a business part of it. So I was not afraid of knocking on doors. And there's a story in the book about how I said I wanted to break into television. I wanted to break into the BBC. And then I did it literally. I evaded security there. And I walked around the offices with a stack of my headshots and resumes. And I would check if the office was empty, a producer's office or an executive. And I'd put my picture and resume on their desk. I'd pick up a piece of their stationery and write "must see" and then sign it in an indecipherable signature. And then attach. And I got through about a dozen offices before I thought, I'm pushing my luck here, I've got to get out. And I got out without being caught. And I thought the punchline to this would be one day I'll be sitting on a talk show telling people how it turned my career. And I got a call a week later, a month later, the BBC offered me this series. I didn't get a call a month later. I didn't get a call a year later. I didn't get a call a decade later. It was just fell flat on its face. And eventually it comes back in the story. There's a lot of recalls. I ended up producing and writing a series for BBC One it was about, I think 25 years later, I finally got into the BBC legitimately through the front door and not having to bypass security. So I was always entrepreneurial, and that taught me a big lesson, because I realized that if you take risks, if you are prepared to bash your head against a brick wall, you'll bleed, but the wall might break eventually. That's not a very good analogy. Call it a door, because I don't try this at home, kids. Don't try any of it at home. If you just knock on doors loudly enough, eventually it might open, and that's what happened. And that was an incredible turnaround. It was an incredible turnaround.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible to do all these wonderful, partly schemes, partly hard work of writing, all this stuff. It's perfectly possible to do all this and nothing happen. But if you don't do all that, it's almost certain nothing's going to happen. You have to put yourself out there as much as possible in this industry.
Well, yeah, I mean, if anyone's watching this as opposed to just listening, you'll see behind me these bookshelves. Right? They go all the way across the room, and they are stuffed with scripts that I've written. Stuffed. I've had probably, I don't know, 7 or 8 movies made. It's just good. It's a good track record. And I don't know, the same amount of TV shows. For every one of those that got made, there are 10 on this shelves behind me that haven't. And trust me, almost all those 10 are better than the things that got made. I really do believe that.
Yeah.
So that whole Malcolm Gladwell thing of 10,000 hours, that's what creates luck. That's what creates opportunity. You have to put in your 10,000 hours to become skilled or talented or whatever at anything. And it doesn't matter who you are, except Beethoven, perhaps. And I'm not Beethoven. And so I think that is really important. It's really important. And those things, those choices that you make will come back at some day and pay off, unless you are seriously untalented. And I very much doubt that you are, because I've read things that are written by people, young writers, and I thought, this is awful, they shouldn't do it. And then a few years later, they've learned how to master it and they go on to have success. So we can all learn, we can all find our own talent. What is talent anyway? You know, it's learning. And screenwriting and TV writing is learning a craft. It's not necessarily it's semi-artistic, but it's mostly a craft.
Although now you've told me you're not Beethoven, I'll cross off all the symphony questions I had for you.
Good. Yeah, I have zero musical ability. I cannot sing and I cannot dance.
One of the ones I did want to ask you about, so you worked a couple of times with Tracy Ullman. That was one of your first TV credits. Well, certainly over in the States anyway.
Yeah, I worked a few times with Tracy, actually. And she's fantastic. I still think she is technically the most talented comedian that I've ever worked with. Technically, I am in awe. I consider that I have quite a good range. I'm very versatile, and but she is something else. I mean, she is a true throwback to the actress, however they want to be called these days. And there is, in my view, I've not come across anybody better. That she's extraordinary. The voices, the looks, everything. And then I worked with Tracy. The most recent time was, the most recent was probably 10 years ago now. We did a show, a play on stage. It was actually a stage reading. It was what Eric Idle called a film for radio. And it was this kind of group of actors doing a radio play in a theatre, but with live sound effects. So you had like a guy in a sandpit, and you had all the bells and the whistles, and it was as if we were recording a show in the 1930s for radio. And it was a parody. He'd written it originally as a film script called The Remains of the Piano, and it was optioned by Miramax and didn't get made in the end. And Eric said, I'm going to do this as a play, and it was called What About Dick? And it's 2 hours of fantastic double entendres, very silly Python-esque humor, and it's actually on Netflix. We filmed it, the last show, or one of the shows that we did.
Because he sold it online originally, didn't he? Am I correct in saying?
Yeah, it's on Netflix. You can see it on Netflix. It's What About Dick? And the cast, I will read it to you because I have actually a poster not too far from where I'm sitting from the show. The cast was, well, we did 2 versions. The first version included Emily Mortimer, who sadly couldn't do the second one because she was tied up with another project. But Sophie Winkleman, who I just worked with on 2.5 Men. I added a man, 2.5 Men. I just played her father in that show. And she, I said to Eric, she's the perfect to fill in for Emily, and she was wonderful. But the cast was Russell Brand, Billy Connolly, Tim Curry, Eric Idle, Eddie Izzard, Jane Leaves, myself, Tracy Ullman, and Sophie Winkleman. How about that?
Yeah, a little bit of a good cast there. Yeah, not bad, not bad.
That's a little bit of a special event, and of course it sold out in about 2 seconds. And it was amazing to be in that play playground with those people, and we all had a lot to do, all of us, racing around from microphone to microphone, and we actually had costumes in that version of it that was filmed, and I just pinched myself being on stage with those people. It was incredible. I've frozen. My picture's frozen. How weird.
Oh, I can still hear you. Can you still hear me? Okay.
I can hear you. Has my picture frozen?
No, it's all going fine for me.
How weird. It's frozen at this end, and I'm doing something weird with my hand. It's not up my nose though, which is good.
It always freezes on the worst possible pose I'm in, if it ever does my end.
Well, no, I look quite thoughtful. It's Rodin's thinker almost.
That's not bad then.
Yeah, but my finger is perilously close to my nose. Anyway.
By the way, if anyone does want to hear, I'm not going to get you to regurgitate the same anecdote. If anyone wants to hear some wonderful stories about how you got to know Eric Idle and got to be one of the Pythons, or at least on the stage version, please do check out my Time Capsule podcast with the wonderful Mike Fenton Stevens, who has also been on the show a couple of times before. So well worth checking out. Right. Just to move on a little bit. One of the earlier acting credits again was in Lethal Weapon 2. So to be in the second one of those, just after the first one hit so big, it was such an 80s classic. That must have been an amazing moment to step on such a big Hollywood production.
Yeah, it was my first ever film. I had by then a lot of theatre, and then quite a bit of theatre, but it was my first ever film. And I had one scene with Danny Glover and Joe Pesci, and it was playing the South African consulate guy, and the scene is a diversion scene. Well, Mel Gibson's trying to get into the building and do something, because the villain was South African. It was Joss Ackland, and they decide to come in, but Joe Pesci's saying he's got a friend who wants to emigrate to South Africa, and I say, of course, we'd love you to come, and it was the time of apartheid, so no one was wanting to emigrate to South Africa. He says, I'm delighted to help you. And then he said, oh, he's here, come on in. And then Danny Glover walks in. And then I have to do the kind of, the aghast face reaction of oh my God, it's a black man who wants to immigrate to South Africa. And so he said, he's the guy he'd love to go. And I said, well, that's impossible. I can't arrange that. And he says, well, why not? And then my line that became a catchphrase for the movie was, because you're black. And that line, Joe Pesci could never get through the scene without laughing. As soon as I said, because you're black, with a sort of aghast expression, he just laughed, and he kept repeating it in scenes afterwards. And so it sort of became a bit of a catchphrase for the movie, which was, the top grossing movie of that year. So to be my first ever film, that was quite an extraordinary coincidence or piece of luck. And I still, to this day, have certain people who will yell at me, but you're black. And most often they are. And I met actually quite a well-known rapper recently who, I thought, oh God, this guy's going to just, think, who is this British guy with a fairly upper-class accent? And I've got nothing in common with him. He's in his, he's an old man, and I'm this young rapper. And he looked at me, and his face just went with this huge smile, and he went, but you're black. And it was oh no, we're off to the races now. It was great.
Just to link in with that story, the other one I was going to ask you about, which was one of the pull quotes which they sent us over when they were talking about the book, was when you met Emily Blunt on the 7-year engagement, and she talks 5-year engagement, sorry, pardon me. So I've added 2 years. That was a couple of sequels later. But
the film was long enough to add 2 years at one point. I think it was a 4.5-hour version, which they cut down. Yeah.
But I believe you have a little anecdote about you guys and talk about an STD, her mum, and some pastry you were eating at the time. Yeah,
there was the outtakes of that I still have. And actually, if you go to my website, www.jimpiddock, Piddock, please don't spell it wrong, .com, you'll see a small clip from these outtakes it was my first scene in that film. I just arrived up in wherever we were in Michigan, I think, and I had a scene which was set in a hospital waiting room, and Emily was my daughter, and I divorced her mother long ago, played by the absolutely wonderful Jackie Weaver, the Australian actress, and a multi Academy Award nominee. And she, Emily, I'm trying to explain why we got divorced. And the running gag in the film is that I appear in every scene with a new young Asian girlfriend. It's like every single scene, it's a different Asian girlfriend, half my age. But I'm explaining to her how the reason her mother divorced me was because I transmitted gonorrhea to her mother, which I picked up in Thailand. And she knew that I'd been there on business and she'd never been to Thailand. So it was a strain that was only whatever. And then the director made them fake. We were having a tough time anyway, because Emily and I had this weird thing that happens every so often with two actors, where we couldn't look at each other in the eye without laughing. Actually, to be fair, mostly she would laugh. I'm a bit better about that. I don't often go, but working with Fred Willard, you learn how not to do that.
Yeah.
But she couldn't look at me, and so we were having trouble, but we were getting through it. And then the director, Nick Stoller, made a fatal mistake. He said, "Jim, I love you're always good at improvising stuff. How about you're eating throughout the whole scene this big bear's claw donut with a lot of sugar icing on it, and it looks pretty disgusting, and it's quite funny you just stuffing your face the whole way through the scene." And by now I'd got through probably about 10 of these things, so I was feeling pretty awful. And he said, "Why don't you just sort of reference how the icing on the donut reminds you of gonorrhea?" I said, "Nick, that is appalling." He said, "Yes, it is appalling, but I know you can pull it off." And it's classy stuff, huh? So I would do this, and every time I tried to do it, every time I was saying, "Yeah, as a matter of fact, I was playing a guy from Manchester. As a matter of fact, this reminds me of this donut reminds me of a bit of gonorrhea." I couldn't get it out. I couldn't get the line out. And it got to the point where I would just literally hold the donut up and look at it, and I'd be about to say the line, and Emily was gone. And it happened time and time and time again. So I was trying to, okay, I'm going to take a deep breath. And then that made her laugh, the fact that I was just trying to take a deep breath before saying the line. So we never shot it. I don't think we ever got it.
I love that. That's great.
Better in viewing than in relating. It's worth watching on my. It's on my comedy reel on my website, because it still makes me laugh to this day. She's got such a lovely giggle, and she's just helpless.
I mean, I'm of the British sense of humour. The second that you mentioned gonorrhea, I started sniggering like a child. So it's all good.
Exactly. And you know what? I admit that. I read Cary Grant's autobiography many years ago, and he admitted that this most elegant, suave man had schoolboy toilet humor. He was totally scatological, loved it, and I don't deny the fact that I'm in that same camp.
Well, you mentioned Fred Willard there. So you got to work on a few Christopher Guest movies, so Best in Show, Mascots, and Mighty Wind. And you actually co-wrote Mascots, if I'm correct?
Yeah.
And you're in there with Fred Willard, such a comedy great, late great now, unfortunately. But I thought maybe you could talk a bit about him. And I found it so insane that there was the scandal a few years before he died about him going to adult movie theater and doing what people do in adult movie theaters. Do you think that would even get looked at today?
No, probably not, unless someone else was involved. No, I mean it was so benign.
Yeah,
it was so benign. And Fred's it was awful, because Fred's a very quiet, private guy, and he's just the sweetest, most gentle soul. No, I agree. It wouldn't cause a ripple. No, I don't think now. But yeah, I mean, he was a genius. I mean, there are very few people I would say that about, but he was a comic genius. And people who don't know his work need to familiarize themselves, because he created this amazing persona of the boorish, bull in a china shop American kind of guy. And in Best in Show, he does it brilliantly. He's commentating with me on the dog show, and he just knows nothing about dogs. He's saying the most inane things, and clearly is an absolute idiot, and with no sense of decorum or taste. And I'm this kind of very polite dog expert who's trying to keep the show on track as we commentate it on it. And it was a wonderful experience because I learned how to play a straight man in that. And you can't compete with that. So I knew enough about comedy by then that, you know, as a straight man, you can double the laughs in a scene if you don't try and out funny the funny man. And so it's your reactions that you can get a laugh upon a laugh. So I just decided I would try and react, and I tried to give myself an arc of being slightly amused at first by all this stuff he's saying, which is ridiculous about dogs, and then confused, and then pretty annoyed actually. But I'm having to cover all of those reactions, but you can see it in my eyes and whatever. And then it gives me something to play with throughout the scene. And Chris edited it together so brilliantly because you see the whole progression. I mean, we're in about 45 minutes, the last half of the movie, in and out, in and out, in and out. And we kind of had this kind of thing going. And then what was lovely was that I did get finally to stick the dagger in because he says something ridiculous again, completely inane. And I just casually turn to him and say, yes, I remember you said that last year. And it just completely cut his balls off. It was just so damning that, you know, oh God, you're repeating your bad jokes. And it was kind of gave us a good punchline, gave us a good kind of period at the end of the sentence.
I just love the fact that, I mean, I talk a little bit about Leslie Nielsen. I think when he was at his best, he never telegraphed anything. He just played it straight down the line. That's why he was hired to do those movies, because he was such a great straight actor originally. And I think the way that Fred Willard would do that, he would just never telegraph anything. He would just play it completely straight, doing the most ridiculous things. And it made it 100 times funnier. There was never any little wink of the camera.
Yeah, yeah. No, absolutely. And even if he was playing a guy who thought he was funny himself, you know, he would do that with an honesty and an integrity. But you're not seeing an actor thinking they're funny. You're seeing this, you know, ridiculous person think that they're, you know, telling the funniest joke ever, and it's awful. Yeah. That's what he was. He was brilliant. He was brilliant at it.
Yeah, I mean, just some of the stuff he would say, that the restraint it would take not to give a little, you know, in any of the delivery is just amazing. A couple of the projects which I did want to get onto. One which I'm hoping you won't have got asked about that much, but Angel, the spin-off from Buffy. It's one of my favorite episodes of that series, only because the character gets put through these ridiculous trials all the way through by this smug valet played by yourself. And just, it's all about like him kind of teasing out clues from yourself. And in the end, it's all for nothing because it's about getting a second chance. And he already had a second chance by being brought back, by being given his soul. I thought that was just the most astounding performance. Again, you portrayed a lot of this kind of skill of not telegraphing anything, but just the smugness of this guy could just be radiated for miles.
Oh, great. I don't often get to play smug. So that's nice. Yeah. No, that's a fun show to do. I really enjoyed that. And then I think it was Joss Whedon, right? Yeah. And I was on another show of his called Dollhouse. And Dollhouse I'm addicted to. There are a few shows that I've been in that there's a short-lived series, but with Eliza Dushku. And
yeah, I loved it.
But it was genius, Dollhouse. I liked Angel, but Dollhouse I thought was so, and it's not my kind of thing normally. It's not my genre that I would be attracted to, but I ended up watching Dollhouse religiously because I thought it was such a great show. I mean, what a talented guy.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just astounding. I hate this kind of thing of genre TV, as it's kind of sometimes referred to, being looked down on. If it's good TV, it's good TV, or good writing, it's good writing. It doesn't matter whether it's in sci-fi or anything else. Like sci-fi can do wonderful allegories for our lives or for humor, for anything else. And it's just, there's bad ones, there's good ones, like with any kind of TV.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I did want to talk a little bit about your voice work. So one which I really loved, which I think is the only version of Batman which got close to the 66 amount of fun, but also giving some great TV, was Batman the Brave and the Bold. And you worked on that with quite a few different voices.
Yeah, forgive me because I've done a lot of different Batman versions. What I don't even know what I played in that, but I know I played Alfred, the butler, and I mean I played Alfred Pennyworth or whatever in a couple of them. So, but I can't remember in that one. So please forgive me. It does become a bit of a blur, especially with voiceover work, because you go in, you do it, and you're out, and you're finished in a couple of hours. So I don't remember what I played in that. I think I did do several voices. That does ring a bell. Who was Batman in that one? And then I can tell you.
Diedrich Beta.
Oh, well then, Diedrich Bader. Yeah, and oddly enough, interestingly enough, that you bring this up, I had lunch. The first lunch I've had since the pandemic began. I've gone to lunches in London because people are a bit looser there, but in California, I had lunch with Diedrich yesterday. Because he is interviewing me at my book launch at a bookstore it's the oldest independent bookshop in LA, and we're doing on Friday night. Tomorrow night we're doing a launch, and he is going to interview me there. So I had lunch with him for us to kind of go over what we might talk about.
Oh wow, yeah, he's an amazing actor. I think one of these far underrated actors. Very, very great comedy presence.
I've worked with him a few times, and he's a good friend and a really smart guy too. So yeah, that was bizarre that he brought him in. Yeah, he that was his Batman. Yeah, no, I did a few of those.
Yeah, I just loved it. The idea was it was kind of like a team up every week with Batman and another superhero. And it just again, they tell some really good stories, but it was kind of a very fun, very larger than life, very like Batman was ridiculously over the top and like this. And it was just, it reminded me of the 60s show, which it just seems like it must have been so much fun to do. One of the other ones which you've done more recently is Star Trek Lower Decks. I'm a huge Star Trek fan. I was just wondering if you remembered a lot of that episode.
Yeah, this is awful. What did I play in that? And I'll tell you. What did I play in that?
Sorry, I've lost it. Sorry. It is somewhere in my notes. No, sorry. I was just wondering if you remember the episode.
I think I played a captain something or other.
Yeah, it was one of the captains or an admiral.
Yeah,
sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. That might have been done. It could be wrong. That might have been done during the pandemic, in which case I would have recorded it. I think that was the one I did where I recorded, because I did a few things I recorded in my walk-in closet at the house, because people weren't going into studios at that time, with COVID. So the office I'm in now is a bit too cavernous because there's a big kind of vaulted ceiling. So they said, can you move the equipment upstairs to your walk-in closet? And so I did that, and it's actually where I recorded the entire audiobook for Caught With My Pants Down. But I'm out of the closet now. I finished that. So
hey.
Yes, poor joke. So yeah, that I do remember doing that, and I think that was one I recorded in the closet.
Yeah, it was a show which ended up being launched during lockdown, and I think it got rushed up for being released because it was recordable during lockdown for obvious reasons. Tooth Fairy I did want to talk about. So I think this is one of the greatly underestimated films. I think it's a perfect popcorn movie. It's just great to take the family to. Really fun premise, like Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson as the Tooth Fairy. What was the kind of inspiration behind the film?
Thank you. I agree with you, and I think when you say underrated, I think you're referring to it critically underrated.
Yeah, a lot of people had a good time with it.
Yeah, no, it was never going to be an Oscar contender. It is by far the biggest grossing movie that I've been involved with as a writer. I think it made 130 million at the box office alone. So God knows what it's in ancillary. And I think the film cost 48. So that's a fairly hefty, return. Although the studios managed to make sure you don't see any net profits. That's a whole chapter I talk about in the book. Beware. That was an interesting one. That came about because I was having dinner with my daughter, who was 9 at the time, and I just got divorced, and she was staying with me, and we were chatting about stuff, and I said I'd like to write a Christmas movie about Santa Claus at some point. And we talked about that, and I realized that they've all been done, every version. And I thought, well, what else is there? I said, what about the Tooth Fairy? And she loved that idea, and we talked a little bit. And then I scribbled down all these notes the next day, and I had a meeting with Jason Blum, who had just left Miramax, and he's now gone on to be the greatest producer of horror movies in the world. I mean, he's
Almost.
Paranormal, everything is his. And Jason really liked it. He said, "Well, can you write up a proper full-length treatment for a movie, story?" And I said, "Yeah, I think I can." I went away and did that. And when I wrote that, I had a kind of a realization. It's one of those moments in your life where you go, "Aha, okay." I've written family movies before, and I didn't feel I wanted to do another one at that point. There was something else I wanted to write as a screenplay. So I said to Jason, "Look, I'm going to write this whole story, and then let's find two experienced big major studio family movie writers, and have them write it, and then I'll executive produce it and oversee that and help them." And he said, "No problem." And we found Lal Gantz and Babalu Mandel, who have, amazing track record. They've written everything from Parenthood to League of Their Own to City Slickers. You name it. Those comedies of that era were theirs. And they came on board, and it was a very smooth process for a studio movie. They did their rights, their drafts, and then they brought in a couple of writers from The Simpsons, Chernin and Ventimiglia, I think their names are, and then Sterling and Ventimiglia, and then they ended up getting writing credit, and then a lot of other people did drafts, a lot of very well-known writers, which is the way the studio system works. They all punch it up, and then the last person who did it was Randy Mayhem Singer, who did Mrs. Doubtfire. She wrote Mrs. Doubtfire, but she's the king or queen, I should say, of rewrites. And she doesn't, when you do rewrites, you often don't get a credit on the movie because you just get paid an enormous sum of money. Absurd amount of money for doing a week's work. And then that's it, you don't get a credit. But she did, and the five of them, took the screenwriting credit, and I took the writing credit, and the story by credit, and the executive producing credit. And just a little inside business thing, the story credit is actually more valuable because it's the underlying material. So I got a bigger percentage of royalties than they did, which was nice. And they did all the heavy lifting, which was even nicer. So I would just be in studio meetings, and having been in them before as the screenwriter, listen to these kind of notes that were, some of them are good, some of them are bad, some of them are just dumb. And when you hear the bad or the dumb ones, your sphincter tightens. You go, "I don't know how. I'm gonna try not to get defensive. I'm trying not to argue in the room. I don't know how I'm going to do this." But I would just smile when they gave these notes and go, "Absolutely. What do you think, guys?" And turn to the writers and leave it in there. It was terrible. But then I did, to be fair, I did help solve a few problems along the way on the script with the various writers. But anyway, I wasn't involved in the production really at all, because by then I was doing something else. And as an executive producer, you sometimes are very involved and sometimes you're not. But I did go up to the set in Vancouver for a couple of days. And when I arrived, someone said, "Who are you?" I said, "My name's Jim Piddock." And they said, "What do you do on the movie?" And I said, "I'm executive producer." And they said, "Well, what does that mean?" And I said, "Well, it can mean different things on different movies. But in this particular instance, it basically means me being on set for 2 days. And anyone who asks me what I'm doing there, I just tell them I'm the executive producer. That's my job, essentially, for 2 days." And then I went on to the set proper. And then Dwayne Johnson, who I'd not met, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, and introduced himself, came over, and then he stopped the shooting and said, "Look, I want to gather everybody round, cast, crew, everybody." And they all came around. He said, "I'd like you to introduce you to the man who is responsible for you all being here today and having a job." And I just was blown away. It was one of the most touching professional things anyone had ever done. Writers on movies, for those that don't know, are very rare that they're allowed on set, let alone if they are, they go over there and go with the food, beers, and shut up, and don't show your face and talk to anyone. In television, it's very different. You're the king of the jungle as a writer in television. But to do that and to pick that out, and never having met me, I thought it was way and above the call of duty. And I talk about that in the book and say, I'd heard he was a classy guy. I heard that he was pure class. And that was the ultimate proof to me. I mean, and what was great is he turned out to be lovely in the movie, as did Steve Merchant, as did Julie Andrews, as did Billy Crystal, Seth MacFarlane. There's a whole host of wonderful performances in that movie. And it's interesting you say that you think it's underrated, because Steve Merchant, who's, you know, he's a bit like me, his humor is a bit edgier than the standard Disney fare. And it's not a Disney movie, but it could easily be. It's 20th Century Fox, but it feels like an old school Disney movie.
It does.
But I remember coming out of that premiere in LA and Steve Merchant saying to me, man, you'd have to be a pretty hard-hearted sort not to love that movie. And I thought it's absolutely right. We could all say something cynical about it and how it's a little sentimental or a little, you know, on the nose and, you know, cliche Disney stuff. But it really, it's got enough good humor in it that undercuts all those sentimental moments that it does make it work. And I thought that Steve was absolutely dead on with his assessment of that.
And I think you're completely right. Sorry, I'd spoken earlier to say that it was underrated. Like, as you say, kind of people want to see it, people loved it, but it was like the critical pie-facedness, which I really hate. Because I went with my kids. You mentioned about you being divorced from your daughter's mum. I think at the time recently divorced from my ex-wife, and these were my stepkids, but they were so young when I came into their life. They are my kids, and it was just so wonderful to go to them, to have such a good time with it, and just light-hearted fun with a bit of edgy humor, which was kind of nice for the adults in the room.
Absolutely, that's the hallmark of a good family film. If it's fun for the parents, and I believe it is. I think it is, and I feel that you're right. I think in different circumstances and different time and place, that could have been released, and that could have been a $500 million movie as opposed to 130.
Yeah. Look, we're going to head towards the end of the interview now, because I know that you've got back-to-back interviews. Thank you very much for making time. Just before we do, this goes out on the radio, of course. Would you like to choose a song or a couple of songs to be played out to get us out of the interview on radio?
I have so many songs I like. I'm going to ask you to play theme tune, if you can find it, from my soccer club, my football club. I can say football. This is going out in Great Britain. Crystal Palace, who are doing incredibly well now, and I write a lot about them in the book because I'm very involved with the club. And their tune that they always play when the teams score or the teams come out is "Glad All Over" by the Dave Clark Five. And if you have that, you can. I did a sports interview this morning, and they introduced me with that music, and it made me very happy. So if you can do that as my exit, I will be thrilled.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much, Jim. Again, the book for everyone is "Caught With My Pants Down: and Other Tales from a Life in Hollywood" by Jim Piddock. Forward by Eric Idle. Again, just the wonderful reviews it's getting. The book's amazing. Four words.
Four
play.
That's Eric for you. And as I said, all the royalties, my royalties, are going to charity. All I will ask for people is, if you buy it and you like it, please, please, please rate it and review it on Amazon, because that really helps. That really helps build the momentum, and we will make more money for those charities. So it is all going to 3 great causes. So please do remember to rate and review it. And I promise you, I don't make these promises often. I never ask people to watch things I'm in. I think it's a really fun book, and I think you'll enjoy it. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you very much. You take care, Jim.
You too. Bye-bye now.
Thank you very much to Jim Piddock. I was going to let him go as soon as possible, because I know, again, back-to-back interviews. Thank you very much for watching the Dr. Squee show tonight. I've been Dr. Squee. That was my show. You can catch this on the radio with all the songs and fun chat and all shenanigans added in. Every Tuesday, you can listen to the show. That's 6 p.m. till 8 p.m. This one will be going out this Tuesday coming, and it's on sw20radio.co.uk, the new sound of South Wales. And you can catch all sorts of wonderful shows on that station, such as Amy Claire's doing the All Request show as we speak. So after you finished watching this, go over there, request a song, have some good times with that. You've got Matt in the Morning. My good friend Matt Lees is on from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. every Monday and Tuesday, or every other Monday and Tuesday. And then the other week, he's on the 5:05 drive, which you can catch at 5 5 on a Thursday, depending on his work patterns, because the guy's got to work as well. There's always so many fantastic shows. If there isn't a show on SW20 Radio, you can catch some fantastic music, and they're always adding new music and new fun things for you to enjoy. So do check that out. Thank you for watching. As I say, I've been Dr. Squee. That was my show. And please remember, guys, in a world where you can be absolutely anything, please be kind.